Have you ever wondered how big companies make moves that seem scary at first, but later it turns into massive wealth for the people that actually understand how to capitalize on those opportunities? Well, right now, Netflix trying to buy Warner Brothers is one of those moments where most people are just only thinking about all the bad that it could do, while the investors are being able to see something completely different. So today in this video, I'm actually going to show you how this move can make you wealthy with using these tactics to learn how to see opportunities instead of just only seeing fear, so that it can change your financial future. So let's jump right into it. So why is everybody freaking out? Well, see, the interesting thing is because right now, most people are only focusing on the jobs that can be lost. They're only focused on the actors losing their roles or even getting a cut on the income that they used to actually make. But then simultaneously, they're really looking at the fear of what this company can do because it has now more control. And you see, the issue with this is they see danger, but not opportunity. And so the question that we should be asking, but what if every scary moment actually carries a hidden blessing behind it? Now, the interesting thing about this is there's something that's called the law of polarity. And the way it works is there's going to be an opposite to every situation. So you can never have just abundance without also having lack. You can't just have positivity or positive situations without also having negative situations as well. But then what's the most important is you can't have problems while also not simultaneously having opportunities. And you see, what's interesting about the times that we live in now is most people are using, by default, only being able to see one side. What it is that is missing in their lives, instead of seeing all of the opportunity that's in their lives. And so what we have to remember, every challenge comes with a chance to grow, to learn, and to also to win. But what's interesting is what opportunities are hidden inside of these challenges that we are just not seeing. So to give you some story as to why most people are missing this is because they don't understand that currently right now Netflix is trying to buy Warner Brothers, but they don't understand the company that they're actually trying to buy. And what's interesting is they're actually buying a treasure itself. Because you see, they're buying all of the movies that they didn't make. They're buying all of the superheroes that they didn't create. They're buying all of the games that they didn't create. And what's interesting is the shows themselves. HBO is also what Warner Brothers owns. They're wanting ownership of it all. And the reason why this is so important is because, see, if Netflix is after this, then that now means it's kind of like someone giving you the opportunity to buy treasure from you. And the moment that you buy it, you immediately are getting returns based off of what it has already been doing for you. So these big movies that are already well known are still making money for Warner Brothers. But if that deal actually goes through, then now all of those proceeds from every single opportunity that they had ownership of, Netflix immediately gets those proceeds. So it's like buying something, but immediately starting to see some return coming back to you. It's absolutely fantastic. But how does Netflix turning big actually benefit you? Well, see, that's a great question. Now, what's important for us to actually understand is when companies actually grow, your investors grow as well. And so what we have to remember is that if the company is actually having more of value, they now have the opportunity for their shares to become more valuable as well. Now, so investors are buying shares specifically to invest into those companies, but as a result, that investor is now considered part owner of that actual company itself. So they're able to get pieces of those proceeds depending on how big their shares are. And so what's interesting is by understanding these principles can help us to understand that if this is what Netflix is after, what does that now do to the investors that are also backing them as well? And so why most people are missing these blessings? Well, it's because, again, most people are operating just on fear. They're choosing to focus on all the problems that they can see of this deal actually producing. And then simultaneously, they're worried about the drama and the headlines that are coming off of it. But see, I want to submit to you that a lot of the decision making that actually happens and that you choose to make oftentimes is reinforced by the things that you oftentimes hear. And so what we got to do is silence the noise and actually do our own research to actually understand what is happening underneath the surface that nobody else wants to talk about. And so, how do wealthy people think when everyone else is in panic? Investors think completely different than most people because while this makes the company stronger, this would actually increase the future of the cash flow of what Netflix is able to produce. They're already starting to create, their own original movies, even TV shows themselves. But what actually happens when they actually have a whole studio filled with so much information, tech, scripts, that they can continue to keep putting on repeat so that they can continue to keep making the classics that we actually love. And so for right now, this is a really great investment in trying to move forward. And what's interesting about how investors think is they think from a perspective of, I might not necessarily be the person that actually created this opportunity. I might not even been the owner or the founder of this idea. But how can I actually still get a piece of the revenue that they are actually still generating? And then they can actually see, what does this now mean in the next 5 years? They're able to actually look into the future and say, okay, I have to evaluate this information that I have now. How could this actually affect the next 5 years of Netflix if this deal were to happen? And so the question we got to be asking ourselves, but what does this mindset look like in real life? And I'm actually going to share this in a story. There's a chef that actually has a daughter that's normally always upbeat, and every single time that she comes back from work, she's only thinking about the positive things of what happened through that day, of what actually made that day great. And so every day like clockwork, when he sees his daughter come in, he always asks her, how was your day? And she will always respond and say, Dad, my day was absolutely fantastic. My coworkers are the best. They brought me lunch that I didn't even ask for. And I even got a raise. And so she's just constantly just sharing why her day was so absolutely incredible. And then there was a particular day where she just wasn't herself when she came back. But her dad is always wanting to check up on her and asking her to still the same thing. Baby, how was your day? And she says, Dad, everything just seemed to just continue to keep going wrong. My car was breaking down. I wound up being late because of it. And the boss that I thought was understanding written me up for it and thought that I was just making excuses. And so she just goes on and on and on about why her day specifically just seemed like everything around her was crumbling. And so after the dad is making sure that she got everything off of her chest, he then says, you know what? Today you're going to be my assistant chef. So I need you to go into the kitchen and get me some items for what we're going to be preparing. So he says, go into the pantry and get me a potato. And then get me a coffee bean. And then get me an egg. And so the daughter actually responds and says, Dad, I know you're a chef, but this doesn't seem like it's going to turn out that well. Right? And he says, it would all make sense later. But what I want you to do right now is I want you to take this potato and I want you to put it in your hand and I want you to squeeze it. And I want you to tell me what it is that you observe about the characteristics of this potato. And so she goes to squeezing it, and then she realizes that, well, she's like, well, Dad, it's firm, right? It's solid. And he says, okay, that's great, baby. But he says, now I want you to drop it. And so she drops it on the floor, and he tells her, what can you observe? And so when she picks it up, she's like, well, I mean, it's in its same form, right? It's not changing. He's like, that's excellent. So now I want you to go get a pot and I want you to fill it up with water and make sure that you put it on the stove so that it comes up to a boiling point. And then once when it reaches to a boiling point, we're then going to add that potato into that boiling water. So eventually when they come back, she then places the potato into the boiling water. And so he said, baby, just let that sit. You know, we'll come back again as well, and we'll come back and see what we can observe. So when they finally come back, he says, all right, baby, I want you to now take the potatoes out. And she's kind of freaking out because she's like, Dad, like, I can't take it out. Like, it's crumbling and it's falling apart. And the dad just looks at her. He says, that's okay, baby. That's okay. Let's go on to the next one. I want you to get that egg. And I want you to do the same exact thing. Let me know what the characteristics are that if you squeeze it as well as drop it, let me know what you think. And here it is. She's like, well, Dad, if I squeeze it, it can crack. And if I drop it, it's definitely going to break. He's like, well done. But now I want you to put this egg into that boiling water. And so she goes into putting into the boiling water. They eventually come back. And later on, he says, okay, I want you to take that one out. Now tell me what you see now. And what she told her dad was, well, when I squeeze it, it has like a durable substance now. It has multiple layers if I try to peel it. And if I drop it, it almost seems to like bounce. And he says, that's excellent. Now let's move on to the last one, the coffee bean. And he says, I want you to take this coffee bean and do everything that we did before. So she squeezes it. She's like, this is firm, stable. And if I were to drop it, it'll be just fine. And so then they proceed to now putting that into the boiling water. And eventually when they come back to see what the results are, the dad immediately says the same thing. Now, baby, I want you to take that coffee bean out and tell me what you can observe. But his daughter started to freak out because she noticed that she wasn't able to actually see the coffee bean because it seems that the coffee bean actually changed the actual color of the water. And she's like, Dad, I cannot find the coffee bean. I can't find it. And he said, okay, well, that's fine if you can't find it. But tell me, what can you observe? And she's like, well, before we were even coming this way, it smelled great. And I almost felt drawn to make sure, like I wanted to figure out what it was. And to know that this is what it was, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And he says, okay, well, what else can you observe? Well, because it smells so great, I definitely want to taste it. So then she goes in for a taste. And she was like, everything that drawn me to this, and now being able to actually experience it for what it is, it just became the peak of her day. And what she also noticed is that the coffee bean itself changed the entire color of the water itself. And so then the dad goes into a teaching mode and he says, now baby, the reason as to why I had you to do all of these things. Notice how in the beginning, the potato itself, that is an individual that has the mentality of a person that wants to portray themselves as somebody that can take whatever life throws at them. They want to act like they can do everything on their own. But the hard times actually represents that boiling water. And so when they actually have to go through a trial that we all have to experience at some point, what we notice is it crumbled. It fell apart. And he was like, is that the kind of mentality of a person that you want to be? And she's like, oh, absolutely not, Dad. Like, no, absolutely not. He said, excellent. So let's go to the next one. The next one, we realize that this is a mentality of a person that is very fragile. They let everything get to them. And so what happens when they go into hard times, they start to feel like that the world is after them, that life is happening to them and not for them. And so they become very bitter and they start to build up these walls and these layers around themselves because they no longer want to get hurt. But what happens is that this individual now is solely focused on just themselves. And so now, whatever happens to anybody else, they don't care. And he says, so baby, is that the kind of mentality that you want to have? And she's like, absolutely not, Dad. And he's like, all right, so let's go on to the last one, the coffee bean. Now, when we were able to test this thing out on its own, it was able to stand firm on what it believes, regardless of who's watching. But when it gets tested on what it actually believes, when it goes into hard times, it doesn't allow the environment itself to affect and change them. The coffee bean mentality goes in and actually changes the entire environment. Now there's a difference in terms of what that actually means. Because you see, the coffee bean effect is an individual that regardless of what they go through, they're always so focused on how they can be a blessing to other people. And what's interesting about that is the greatest example that we compare that with in terms of who was able to demonstrate this coffee bean effect to a T is Jesus himself. Because you see, here it is that Jesus came into this world knowing what it came with and knowing what he was going to have to be willing to endure for him to complete his assignment, his purpose. But here it is, he's still just focused on staying true to what it is that he actually believes, regardless if nobody else believes it. And he understands that those that decide to walk with him get that nice smelling aroma. They're like, what is this? I've never experienced this before. I have to follow it. I have to follow it. And when they actually find it, they're like, I don't ever want to leave this. Because how you completely changed my life as a whole. You've been such a blessing to me in my life that I can't even put into words. And he's like, so baby, is this the mentality of a person that you want to have? And she's like, absolutely, Dad. That's incredible. And so what we have to understand is that these three different mentalities of people actually reveals to us how the potato on the outside look like they were tough, but when they go through hard times, they fall, they crumble. But then we notice the egg that started off soft, but then wind up actually hardening their hearts to the world, and they don't no longer care about anybody else but themselves. But then you got the coffee bean that doesn't allow their environment to change them. But they go in and actually change the entire environment. And so what we got to realize is that this is how God wanted us to actually respond to challenges. To understand that there's nothing in this world that is above us. But we have to understand where we should be ultimately getting our power and our understanding from while we're going through these hard times. And so he can bring that clarity, that wisdom, and that understanding to know exactly what to do when everybody else is crumbling and freaking out. When people are only just wanting to focus on themselves. And so the question that we have to ask, so which mindset actually leads to wealth? Obviously the coffee bean. Because you know what's interesting about a coffee bean is, see, it's there to serve. The very thing that came out of it was solely meant to be a blessing to other people, but not necessarily for the coffee bean itself to actually experience it. They're able to experience the effects as to what they're doing in their environment, but the gifts that they have is not specifically only just for them to be able to experience. And so what's interesting about the people that are wealthy is that they actually choose to stay true to their purpose. They bring the flavor wherever they go. And they want to make a difference no matter the cost. And so the important aspect that we have to learn is that people follow you, opportunities follow you, and the wealth follows you based off of who you are in the inside, and you're making sure that what is in the inside of you is getting shown on the outside of you. And so what we got to remember is, does this show up on the outside of the kitchen? Can this apply somewhere else? And so another story that I want to share with you is how there were two individuals that actually wound up getting in a car accident. And the perspective of this one individual only seen all of the negative sides as to, man, this is an inconvenience for me. I can't afford this. Why did this always has to happen to me? And just having a victim mentality as to wondering why this had to happen to them specifically. But then you got this other individual that actually is taking inventory for the actions that could have potentially caused this because of them. And so here they are, they're saying, yeah, this is pretty bad. But I was also the same person that chose to make a priority to text on my phone, knowing that I should have been responsible and just focus on the road. But in that moment, I chose not to think about that. And what scares me is that I almost robbed my family from being able to have the opportunity to continue to keep experiencing me in the future. Because I could have lost my life. And so what they're doing is they're taking ownership of the decisions that they chose to make in that moment, and this is what it led to. But beyond this point, they now own their story, and from here on out, they decided to create new habits that allows for their family to actually start to receive more of what they have to offer than to just only be thinking in these 1-minute decisions that could have cost them everything. And so what is the point? The point is, there were two people that experienced the same problem, but funny enough, one got bitter, but the other one actually grew and got better. So what we got to remember is the real difference is not the event itself, because it was the same, but it's what they chose to focus on in that moment is what actually changed everything for them. One person, even though it seemed like an opportunity to not be grateful for them circumstances, they seen it as a blessing. But then the other one just decided to continue to just act like they don't deserve any of this at all. And so what does this have to do with Netflix and wealth? Well, you see, what's fascinating is the connection between opportunities and obstacles is just the same. So Netflix buying Warner Brothers, just like the boiling water moment, people are choosing to only focus on the fear, the loss that it can produce, and they're panicking. But then you see there's other people that choose to be a coffee bean, and they're only focused on the growth that it can produce, the ownership of what they get to have, and most importantly, the opportunity to actually experience more of what it means to actually be wealthy. And so again, it is the same event, but two different outlooks that actually changes your results entirely because of what you actually focus on. So how does someone practically benefit from this if we're not an actual millionaire yet? There's actually a simple pathway. So to break it down in its essence, Netflix becoming more valuable increases the prices of the stock, and ultimately the investors that are backing Netflix ultimately starts to actually make money if they're actually getting into these opportunities early. And so again, you don't necessarily need to be a millionaire, but what you do need to do is have the right mindset to put yourself in position to receive that overflow with buckets in hand. Because you see, the blessings comes to those who position themselves before the breakout. So, has something like this happened into the past? Well, there's been countless times. Specifically when we had a recession. There were individuals that were able to see the opportunity that was there while everybody else is selling off their land, selling off their real estate. The people that had a wealthy mindset, they actually went out and got more assets. And when they were able to get these assets, they were able to get them much cheaper than it would have been in any other time. And because they were so focused on the future and to what this could be like years later, they were able to capitalize on an opportunity where everybody else is operating in fear. They're able to seize these opportunities and now forever change their family's life. We got another opportunity where the stock market at one point seemed to crash back in 1929. And here it was, there were people doing the same thing and selling off their shares, panicking, thinking that I need to get as much money as I possibly can before it continues to crash. But then those that had a wealthy mindset, they actually went out and actually bought more businesses and more stocks for what it seemed like to be pennies worth in the stock market. And so now what they were able to do with that same dollar was so much more per share because of, again, the opportunity that they were able to see is that the market is not going to always be like this. And so they're capitalizing on these moments when everybody else is freaking out and thinking that the world is coming to an end, having the potato mentality or the egg mentality of thinking that nothing in my life can go right, and so I'm just going to harden myself. But see, the coffee beans understands that there's more to the story than what everybody else is actually sharing. Because you see, the news is actually going to portray and tell you that you need to get out, that you need to have some form of protection, which is true. But when you allow that to control your decisions, you're no longer in control of your future. And so this is going to help you understand how we can use this information to capitalize on these opportunities. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no risk involved, because there is. And how I relate this is to the same way that we get in a vehicle every single day to get from point A to point B. We think it's normal because we've been doing it for so long. But every single time you choose to actually take that opportunity, you're also taking a risk of actually not coming back home. And so that's how we have to look at risk, is there's actually risk in everything that we do. But the reality is we have to count the cost. Is there more for me to gain than to lose? That's up for that individual. But what you do have to actually know, and it may even take 12 to 18 months for the government to actually decide on whether this is going to be a monopoly or is it even fair for the competitors. And they might just block the transaction altogether. And so there could be a chance that this might not even actually go through. And again, that goes back into the risk itself. What if I buy the stock and the deal doesn't even go through? Again, this is how investors are going to actually take calculated risk. Because you see, the investor, we don't ask, is this opportunity going to be risk-free? But what we ask, if I am right, is the upside itself going to be worth it? And then if I'm wrong, can I actually live with my decision of me taking that loss? And those are the important questions that we ask ourselves, because again, we want to actually protect our emotions, and most importantly, we want to protect our portfolio. Because at the end of the day, when you start thinking this way, you stop gambling, but you actually start investing with peace and discipline. Because you see, now you're not going off of what everybody else in terms of news is actually telling you and trying to sway how you feel, but you're actually going based off of what you're okay with willing to lose if you're wrong, but then making sure you're getting at least double, if not more, if you're right. And so this is what it looks like to have a calculated risk, to know that the decisions that you actually choose to make on a day-to-day basis, you holding yourself accountable, allows you to actually grow. You're never going to meet an investor that their entire portfolio is just completely in the green. And so what we have to do is we have to diversify and not just put all of our eggs in just one basket and expect for just this one to always be there. And so the question that I have for you, so what decision will you make when the opportunity and the risk meets? And so the challenge I have for you is, if this move makes Netflix billions and you were to actually get into a position early, would you be upset with the takeover? Absolutely not. Why? Because you and your family are able to experience more of what life has to offer. Why? Because life gives you what you fight for, or it will give you what you accept. So if you accept the circumstances that you are facing currently right now, and you have that victim mentality as that person that didn't want to hold themselves accountable to all the decision making that they were personally doing to cause certain things in their lives to happen, then you will continue to get what you accept, because you're settling for less. But simultaneously, what you actually fight for is you holding standards to your life to know that I don't have to deal with this. There is a way for me to become better, and simply that's by not accepting fear and fighting for your purpose and using the wisdom that only can come from God to become wealthy and to continue to be a blessing to others. So what mindset will you decide to move forward with? And so I just hope that after watching this video that you realize that life will always show you the negative side of the coin first. But what we gotta remember is that wealth belongs to those who learn to see opportunities behind it. Wealth belongs to those who learn to see the opportunity behind it. Because as I mentioned, this deal hasn't happened yet. And it may take 12 to 18 months for it to actually happen. But here's the thing. How many times were you aware of opportunities that they were going to come or had the potential to come, and you chose to say, I'm just going to wait until next year to see what happens? Do you treat your body that same way? Are you that individual that is like, new year, new me, but not changing any of their habits to actually change as a whole? Are you trying to get in fit once when the new year starts, but then falling off 3 months later? What we're talking about here of how you can become wealthy and rich is based off of shifting your mindset to being able to see that life always has two sides. And majority of the time, people are always only going to show you what they always want to show you, because they want you to live in fear and doubt and confusion. Because if that's the case, you have to now rely on what other people are telling you. But when you're getting your source of trust and assurance in God, and asking him how to show you to have that coffee bean mentality where wherever you go, you're actually changing the environment as a whole. And so I hope that if you learn to think like an investor instead of a spectator, then your financial future will actually change for the better. And this is how this move of using these tactics can make you rich. So if this video has blessed you in any kind of way, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and stay blessed.